welcome into Starting Five here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at 5 Reasons Sports. Producer today is Manny Chang. Our sponsors, All Pro Construction Builders. You can find them at allproconstructionbuilders.com. We know that hurricane season in South Florida is always around the corner. In fact, at this stage, it's actually now. It started already. It may not seem like it, but you can reach out to All Pro Construction Builders, again, at allproconstructionbuilders.com or All Pro Construction Builders on Instagram. Make sure that you get your storm windows, your storm doors, or if you just want to stay in your house for a little while, it has nothing to do with the hurricanes, make sure you get your renovations and reach out to our guy Danny at 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. If you mention 5 Reasons, you get a 10% discount. They offer competitive pricing, but also that quality service, locally made products. They're based in Miami-Dade, but they can service Broward up here and Monroe County down there as well. So reach out to Danny at All Pro Construction Builders, 305-484-4429. Also, our friend Mark Brown, that's where you go if you need a real estate attorney, you need a closing on a property. Mark Brown is the guy to go to. He can also handle all other real estate attorney type things like bankruptcies, etc. But again, right now you want to get that closing done because you don't want to lose the property. We know how hard it is to find one these days. So reach out to MarkBrownPA.com. He is based in Broward County, but again, he can service the entire area as well. He can help you with foreclosure, much more than that as well. And also estate planning, which of course is a big deal if you have a family. 954-566-5678. 954-566-5678. That's MarkBrownPA.com. All right, we are fully in the silly season at this stage, and this is kind of a primer episode for how to handle this if you are following the Miami Heat or any other NBA team during transaction season. We are currently less than a week away from the NBA draft. It's remarkable because it's funny how this works. When your team is not very good, you got 2 months of this stuff almost, okay, before the draft, and that's all it's about. Who are we trading? Who are we picking? Who are we working out, etc. When you go to the NBA Finals like the Miami Heat tend to do, or go to the Eastern Conference Finals like the Miami Heat tend to do, this thing sneaks up on you. It's like, oh my God, wait a second, the draft is next week? And so we actually, have been surprised a little bit by how much we got to get going here on 5 on the Floor because, we haven't done any draft episodes. So we're going to do one on Sunday. And then we're going to do them up through the next week. But it's also free agency because right after the draft comes free agency. So we did a Bradley Beal episode yesterday, and we're probably going to do a Dame Lillard episode on Monday, even though he's not a free agent. We're going to do that with Sean Highkin, who's covered the Blazers for the past few years. And then we're also going to do a Bobby Marks episode because you got to do a Bobby Marks episode because Bobby is a former Nets executive who now works for ESPN and is one of the best guys at breaking down the cap and projecting what your team may be able to do or may want to do. So we're going to do those 2 things early next week, among other things. But here, I want to give you a little bit of a primer for how to approach this offseason, okay? Here's the first thing. Don't believe anything you hear. Say that all the time, but this is sort of the way that this works, and this comment comes in from Aaron. We'll take some of your comments. It seems that the most likely star coming to the Heat is Beal over Dame. What's the one star that everyone that could be available and no one is talking about? Interesting question. I'll put that in my back pocket. I'll get to that before the end of the episode. But basically, what you get here is you have roughly 6 or 7 national media, information people at this point who tend to get the most stuff. Okay, so it's Woj, it's Shams, it's Windhorst, it's our guy Sam Amick, who we had on the podcast the other day. It's Chris Haynes. There's a handful of people who are kind of in that space. And, of course, Woj and Shams kind of dominate a lot of this. And there's a lot of reasons for that I'm not going to get into here, but it's just the reality of it. Okay, so you have that. And then you have the local guys who maybe not get as much stuff these days because of the way that the NBA agents and executives tend to try to get their information out to certain sources who they know have the biggest microphones. But also the locals tend to know the most about their particular team's salary cap, right? Or their particular team's inclinations or interests and all the rest of this stuff. Even if they may not always have the story first, they tend to have the best context about their particular team. In our case, I think we do on the Heat. Okay, so what you try to do is you try to filter through the stuff that's being put out there by the national media and figure out where it's coming from. And if you can do that, then you can figure out how likely something might be. Okay, even if you're not somebody like us at 5 on the Floor who are talking to people inside the Heat organization and agents and players, etc. Hello, Taylor. We appreciate it from the Philippines. Big audience from the Philippines as well. Hello, Bryce. So, okay. So basically, just to give you an idea of how these reports work. So you might have seen that there was a report about how, let's go to Dame first, even though I think Beal is more likely for the Heat. Okay. So the Dame reports start to come out. Initially it comes out with Chris Haynes, right? From Dame himself, okay? But then Chris Haynes follows about how Miami is the candidate here. And if you know Chris, and I do, and I worked with Chris up in Cleveland, and I like Chris, and Chris is a very good reporter. Chris made his way in this business in part because he got a very close relationship with Dame Lillard in Portland. Covered Dame in Portland. And when I say they're close, they're close. It's not like a reporter, athlete relationship where you guys are cool, you know what I mean? And, athlete helps the player sometimes, etc. But, it's mostly professional, okay? Chris and Dame are friends. They're friends. And there's nothing wrong with that in this business, okay? They're legitimate friends, all right? And so when Chris Haynes says something about Dame, it's not like just somebody speculating. It's literally Dame speaking. Just understand that, okay? So when I started to see these reports come out, and then I saw the Chris Haynes' reports related to Dame, I'm like, wait a second, this thing might actually happen this time, right? Because all indications are pointing that direction. And even, Sam Amick, who doesn't have that relationship with Dame, was a national reporter with a lot of sources, came on our podcast and said, this time it seems like this thing is actually real, okay? So that's why you start to take it seriously. But then you have to go through the next set of reports. And so the next set of reports that come in here are that Portland is not inclined to trade him at this time. Okay. So then on that, you got to consider the source, okay? And you got to realize who that particular reporter or those particular reporters are talking to. And you also got to realize, okay, and this is the question you got to ask with all of this stuff. Who does this benefit? Who does this benefit? That's the key thing here. Okay. So who does it benefit to say we're not going to trade, we're not looking to trade him at this time? Well, it benefits the Blazers, okay? That's coming from inside the house. And the reason that that's being put out there is that's a leverage play. We're not going to just trade Dame for anything. Now, the problem for the Blazers is there's always different tracks on this. There's what you want the public to know because it's what you want other teams to know. And it's easier to get it out through one reporter than to contact 29 other teams or to call them all back and to say, well, we're not trading Dame for this or this. Just you get it out through one guy, okay, or one female or whatever, right? So this comes out and I'm like, oh, wait a second. Well, this is damn familiar because literally every time that Woj reported that, the player ended up getting traded. Oh, sorry, I gave away who the reporter was there. Every time. You go back to last year, there was the exact same tweet about Donovan Mitchell. There's been the exact same tweet about the Nets and Kyrie Irving. There's the exact same tweet. It always comes out. And then they had a change of heart. So what do I take seriously? There are certain things that I know who Woj's sources are. Who's reporting it? If it's Woj's, kind of the Blazers front office. Exactly. There are certain things that Woj report. I'll be like, okay, wait a second. That's going to happen because I kind of know where that's coming from, and I know who that. But I also talk to others, and there's times though that it's just like, okay, somebody's carrying water for somebody, and in this case, if you've got Haynes, who I know has this incredibly close relationship with Dame, saying one thing. And you've got Woj saying something other. I'm going with Haynes in this particular case. Okay? And so this is what I think happens with Dame, and then we'll kind of pivot into this. But again, this is more of a primer for all overall free agency and trades and how to understand this stuff, as opposed to just get deep diving on one thing, which is what we did on Bradley Beal last night on 5 on the Floor, which is, I think, already up on the YouTube channel. I think Dame will get traded. Now, that's not a report. That's just a sense, okay, of what's going on here. Because I think ultimately this is a little bit of game of chicken between the Blazers and Dame, where you have this number 3 overall pick, which is a premium asset, okay? But it is not in the Blazers' control. We know that Wemby is going first. The Blazers know that Wemby is going first. But there are 2 players up for number 2. And in most cases, okay, and look, I haven't evaluated both players up close and all the rest of this, but in talking to scouts and agents and executives, etc., the consensus about 2 weeks ago was that Scoot was going to be the number 2 overall pick. Okay. Now, this is what always happens, and it happens in the NFL trade deadline. Okay, and that's a good point, Aaron. It could be traded trade deadline when it's 12th in the West. But excuse me, this happens in the NFL as well. Okay, yes, Dean, also accurate. What happens in the NFL is it's always this thing where we know who the 2 quarterbacks are going to be drafted at the top of the draft, but there's always like the Will Levis thing, right? Like all of a sudden, like 2 weeks before that draft, Will Levis all of a sudden was skyrocketing in workouts and everything else ahead of the other quarterbacks, right? And you had McShay and Kuiper fighting about it and all that stuff. He was never going to be the second quarterback taken. In fact, he didn't even get taken in the first round. But there was all of a sudden teams that are in that 2 spot or the high spot up there who are trying to create a market for their pick, start to get it out through the reporters, the evaluators, and the Kuipers and the McShays, in the same way as they'll do it here with the very Gavoni or the various NBA draft experts. We may take this guy. Okay, so here's what's happening there. And this is why what I say, it's like Portland can't totally control the leverage narrative here because they're somewhat dependent on this game that Charlotte is playing, which is that all of a sudden you have Charlotte at number 2. And, maybe we won't take Scoot. Maybe we'll take, the kid from Alabama, Miller, okay? And I don't believe they're actually going to do that. I think they're going to take Scoot, okay? But here's the other thing. Charlotte does a lot of stupid things, okay? I mean, take a look at Jordan's picks over like a 4 or 5 year span. A lot of garbage in there. I'm not saying that Miller's garbage. I'm just saying they tend to do the wrong thing. So they're so unpredictable that I don't know that Portland has any idea who they're going to get to take at 3. And that number 3 pick matters because if Portland's goal here is to keep Dame, okay, and to attract him to stay, then what they have to do is get him help now. Scoot may be generational, but picking up a point guard when you have a point guard or playmaker, whatever position Scoot ends up playing, but he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. Okay, thank you, Bryce. We'll get to that too. Is that Dame has made it clear through his surrogates, one of whom is Chris Haynes, okay, and others, he wants help now. He doesn't want a 20-year-old kid. He wants now. What kind of help? Who's out there? Is Pascal Siakam enough? Okay, does that make them a contender in the West? I mean, you're talking about a Denver team that looks very, very good. They're going to try to bring Bruce Brown back, obviously. And you have, some teams that are getting healthy out there. And then you've got some teams that are not competing now necessarily, but like a Utah, and an OKC that are loaded up with picks and can make moves at any time to get considerably more competitive. So, look, there's a lot of teams to worry about out West at this point, okay? Or just organizations that are moving in a certain direction that could be, really difficult to deal with over the next few years. So if you're Portland, again, if you're trying to satisfy Dame, you're probably going to have to do it by trading that number 3 overall pick. But that number 3 overall pick's value is somewhat dependent on what Charlotte does it too. Because all of a sudden, here's the thing on draft night. If Scoot's available at 3, there may be some teams out there, I don't know, New Orleans, this whole Zion thing and everything else, that may just give up the farm to move up to get to 3. And if they end up doing that, do the Blazers end up being able to bring in a player, okay, in his sort of, mid-20s, okay, who can help Dame compete this moment? And then all of a sudden, the Dame thing looks different, right? And so that's why I say that any reporter right now who's saying what's going to happen in Portland doesn't know because they can't know because Portland doesn't know because they don't know what Charlotte's going to do and how teams are going to react to that. And so that's why I say this week, take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Try to figure out which reporter is saying it, and then again, what the motivations are, and then how that's going to play out as it goes forward. And again, that's mostly a projection. And then when you're the Heat, to get to them, when you're picking 18, I mean, you're dependent on what all these other teams are doing. So people are asking me, are they going to trade the pick? I don't think they know. I mean, some of it has to do with who drops to them, and some of it has to do with luxury tax and salary cap concerns. Yes, Dean, they already do have Grant. I don't think they think Grant is enough, but again, he's free. They got to figure out what they're going to do with him. So they don't know. So everybody's like, are he's going to trade the pick? I don't know what's going to be there. Greg made a good point yesterday. Again, this is what the service that we can provide because we know the Heat's cap and kind of, what directions they may go, okay, is that it may make sense to trade out of that 18th spot and pick up, a couple of second-round picks because second-round picks in the new CBA are in guaranteed slots at this point, okay? But they count separately from the tax and the cap. And so as a result of that, it may be worth the Heat's while to pick up a couple of those because we know that the Heat tend to scout those players pretty well, even though usually it's when they drop out of the second round. And so then you don't end up with that first-round cap commitment or tax commitment, that you pick up. So again, these are all things to kind of look at, all right? But to pivot back here on the Beal situation, okay? Again, more smoke there than there's ever been. The difference between Dame and Beal, in my view, is I don't think the Washington Wizards feel they owe anything to Bradley Beal. Like Portland may feel they owe it to Dame. It does not feel the same in that regard. And then also there's the minor matter of the fact that Beal's contract is outrageous. And to the point that, let's just be honest here, he's not worth it, okay, at that money. He's only worth it to you if you feel that his impact can help you do the one thing that you didn't do this year, which is to win a championship. But it's talking about $61 million at the end of that deal, okay? So that is the ultimate all-in move. But to do it, if you're the Heat, you're all in, what are you going to have to do anything else? And a lot of you are posting about how they need a power forward, etc., and that's the reality, okay? Just getting Bradley Beal is not enough. Bring Bradley, and then, re-signing Kevin Love, okay, and saying, okay, that's our power forward. No, I mean, obviously you'd like to bring Kevin back as your veteran presence, but that alone is not going to be enough, okay? So that's why we start to talk about Porzingis. Is that actually possible? Well, that's threading a real fine needle, okay? Or others who may be out there at that position. So, again, we'll get into more of the specifics of this, but we're going to be reacting to reports and trying to decipher the reports and figure out where they come from and then running them back to people that we know and saying, is this really reasonable? And so, yes, will we get a few things wrong in terms of our projections? Absolutely. Everybody does. But nobody holds the national media accountable for anything that they get wrong, which is all the time. Insurance by Lynette, our friend Lynette, says height. They do need height. They know they need height. But again, the question is, who's going to be available to them? And the other thing that comes in here is fans also have this thing of, well, if we make a deal with Portland, we can also get Jeremy Grant. Or we make a deal with Washington, we'd also get Porzingis. There are many, 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 many more three-way trades and four-way trades in the NBA than there are two-way trades. Because it's just not always the case that two teams have the assets that the other needs. And that's why you always see this also in the national media. You will see a report, typically by Woj or Shams at the beginning, or Mark Stein or something else along those lines, or Haynes or Windhorst, whatever, that these two teams, have agreed in principle, okay, or this kind of thing to a deal. And then there's always the next tweet, like 3 days later, because it hasn't happened yet, right? Because nothing can be official until the moratorium is over anyway. So you sit there and all of a sudden it'll be, well, now there's some discussion about expanding the deal or other teams getting involved. Well, that was always the case, that there was going to expand the deal because likely the two-team deal wasn't going to work. It's just that when you're a general manager, like say in Andy Ellisburg, you've got 10 teams that you're like, okay, if I need to, get a salary of this type for a player of this type, we can go here, we can go here, we can go here. We go down the list and see if we can execute this thing. And if you go to the Jimmy Butler trade, okay, this is the best example of this, where that trade blew up because there was, of all things, I mean, how can national media guys project this when two teams can't even figure out which players they're talking about some of the time? Remember the whole Dylan Brooks thing, which wasn't really Dylan Brooks. It was Marshawn Brooks with Memphis a few years ago. And remember the thing about how it was Dragic, but it was really Derek Jones and Olynyk, and there was that confusion between the Heat and Dallas. And I can tell you absolutely 100% that the Jimmy Butler deal was going to blow up over all that Dallas stuff. And I was told that Andy Ellisburg pulled the biggest rabbit out of hats, okay, than any executive has ever pulled to get that whole thing of Whiteside going to Portland and that extra pick getting flipped to the Clippers and Mo Harkless and all the rest of that stuff. Remember, the Heat had to give up an extra pick basically because Dallas couldn't hear right or didn't tell the truth or whatever. I mean, you understand, like that doesn't just happen. the Heat had to be prepared for this contingency, this contingency, this contingency. And so what I'm saying is when you listen to these national media reports, you'll get an idea of what is going to happen. But none of these reports are going to be 100% accurate at the beginning because they are being influenced by the agent you're talking to, who has a certain desire maybe for his own player to slide into a slot that's being vacated on that team, or wants to get something out there, or is being, directed by an executive, or somebody else in the organization who's trying to get some kind of leverage for his team, or is simply unknowable, as we're dealing with right now with the Portland and Charlotte situations that first round. Or, again, you can have a situation like the Dallas-Miami situation a few years ago with Jimmy, okay, that, again, that conversation ended up influencing how Jimmy Butler ended up in Miami. So all I'm saying is be careful. This is what I know. The Miami Heat are being highly aggressive right now, okay? That I know. This is not Sleepy Pat. This is not, they like their team, run it back. They do like their team, but they also understand. The run didn't change what they know they need. And some of you are posting size. They need creation in the backcourt. They know it. They need rim pressure. Their offense stalled late in the season. And that's exactly what Dean says. We need size to elevate the scoring of the team to counter what we lack there. Or both, right? Or both. They know it. They're trying to get it. But you do not control everything. There are 29 other teams. There are a million agents. There are players' friends who tell them to change their minds at the last second because, wait, why are you doing this? Okay? Why do you want to leave this place? Why aren't you leaving this place? Why aren't you forcing a trade? So all I'm saying is be careful. And I'm hiding this, save this for the very end. Not hiding it, but saving it for the very end. And thanks to our sponsors, All Pro Construction Builders, and also Mark Brown. And we'll be doing more of these episodes over the next week or two, okay? Check out 5 on the Floor. And definitely hit the notifications on this channel, because otherwise you don't get all of our other stuff. And we're building out a big soccer platform and a whole bunch of other stuff. So make sure you're subscribed here. But you say, well, who's the mystery guy? Well, I think there are some mystery guys. I would watch the Clippers. This question came in earlier. I'm not entirely sure that they're committed to the Paul George, Kawhi Leonard partnership from some stuff that I've heard. I mean, how would Paul George look? Okay. So I'm just saying there are some teams that I think may be more inclined to move players as we get past the draft. It's an interesting draft. It's an interesting draft. And it's also a very interesting time, particularly I think in the Western Conference, where you have these teams on different tracks, where Denver obviously is a team that looks like they could win the conference, like 2 of the next 3 of the next 5 years with what they've set up there. And some of their young players didn't even play during their playoff run. But you also have these teams that could be absolutely, if they play their cards right, and I'm talking particularly somewhat about New Orleans, but really about Oklahoma City and Utah, where you have experienced general managers like Presti and Ainge who have accumulated a ton of picks. And they're also guys who will try to make the big strike for the big player. Presti's done it many times, and we know Ainge, most of the time he just gets close and doesn't do it, but he has done it in the past as well. That in the West, there may be some teams who trade stars because they don't think they're either ready to win like Denver is now, and so they want to try to get in that line with Oklahoma City, Utah, and New Orleans, who have a ton of picks. And they want to pick a direction. And so I would watch for those teams that may want to pick a direction. Think of teams that were kind of good but not great in the West this year. Clippers could be one. They've done an all-in move before. Obviously, the Lakers, based on always on LeBron and AD. But there are teams in the West that you should take a look at. And I think, Minnesota, obviously the town stuff has started to come up. Again, you got to pick a direction. This comes in from Brian. Get John Collins, bring back Gabe. John Collins may be a diminished asset. Atlanta's one of those teams that's been kind of in the middle. We'll see what goes there. But anyway, we'll get into specifics as we go forward. Then I'm not commenting on that. But I just want to say, follow the channel. Follow our comments. This comes in. Shams said Heat made an offer for Kyrie at the deadline. I do not believe that report to be true. I'm not questioning Shams' credibility. That's inconsistent with everything we've heard as far as the Heat's approach to Kyrie. But again, Talk about another team that needs to pick a direction. Dallas Mavericks are a team that needs to pick a direction. All right, thank you for following. I know we were a little all over the place today, but I wanted to give a primer before we go forward. We will get into more detail on specific players as we go. Check out the Bradley Beal episode, though. 41 minutes we did on Bradley Beal, okay? So we're taking it seriously. We're taking it very seriously. It does not mean necessarily that it's going to happen. Thanks to our sponsors, allproconstructionbuilders.com, markbrownpa.com, and we will likely be back here on Monday. Have a good day, everybody.